Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brander Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have somebody on today. He's kind of my neighbor. He just lives an hour and a half up the road, but he's led a fascinating life, continues to lead a fascinating life, has an amazing background. In fact, when I printed out his resume, I had to go get another box of paper to put in my printer because he has done so much for this profession, not just locally, but nationally. And this is a guy who's been there, done that. I knew you needed to meet him. Lieutenant Daniel Byram, welcome to the show.
I'm so pleased to be here with you, Betsy. Thank you.
So, LT, you started as a county deputy in the Midwest in the 70s. You were a baby. Talk to me about that.
I was a kid, about 20 years old, and I was just about to turn 21 when I got hired, and it was a tiny little sheriff's department. I was, everybody had county codes, he'd be DC, whatever. I was DC 7, so that's how many bodies they had. And we patrolled 600 square miles of mainly rural and farmland, but it was adjacent to Dayton, Ohio. So when we had crime, it was usually crime coming from the city over, out into the farmland and so forth. And it was a great learning experience, and helped me appreciate what a small department goes through. A lot of officers that work in a large police department, they don't get it. That when you're one officer and you have 600 square miles or whatever it is that you're patrolling, and you're by yourself and there is no backup except maybe a highway patrolman or city constable somewhere, your skills develop in a geometric way, and you learn a lot, you know a lot, and it may not be as glamorous as working in the city, but it's very, very important. People count on you, and I just love small agencies and love working with them and helping them in any way I can.
Why did you decide to become a cop?
I was of the age where I needed to, make a career decision at some point. And at the time, I was delivering furniture and doing construction and working light mechanical at a gas station, when we remember what those were when you went out and pumped gas and worked on cars. But I happened to deliver furniture to the county sheriff's home, and he was an old World War II vet and kind of a crusty old guy. And I said, I've always thought I'd like to get in law enforcement. What would it take? And he says, you can lift up a couch and stuff. You're strong enough. That was back when they wanted a cop that could fight and clean out a bar out in, roadhouse out in the middle of nowhere. And he says, come on up and see me. So over a period of about a month, he's finally said, we could use you and you can come on board. He says, I got one opening. So I got into it through the sheriff there. And he was as tough as they come. He was a very fine man, and I was always indebted to him for letting me get started and let me get my foot in the door. But it was just something I wanted to do. I was inspired by, one of the kids in school, her dad was a highway patrolman, and I knew him and I always looked up to him. And I do remember one time, I'll share this brief story. This was the county I worked in. I was a kid, loud party, farmhouse. Must have been 100, 150 of us out there. You know how back then, pre-electronics, kids just get together, you build a bonfire out in the middle of nowhere, and all your hot rods and everything are out there. This old Plymouth Fury 3 comes down this dirt road, down this dirt lane where we're at. And all of a sudden the car just leans to the side. Is this behemoth? He must have 400 pounds. His name was Shep. I knew him later. Deputy sheriff gets out with a 12 gauge pump in his hand, like a little tinker toy, walks up. I think you kids need to settle down out here. And I'm like, I'm going to be like that guy someday, had a face like Hoss Cartwright, kind of a looking guy. And that was another part of it. But, those were the people that you run across. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of people. They'll meet a police officer, they'll have an interaction with a police officer. And every minute you're on the street, it matters. You're doing PR, you're recruiting, whether you know it or not.
That's such a good point. I always make that point to my students because, I too grew up on a farm, and the cops in the county, the sheriff's deputies, the town cop, the state trooper, who was a real big deal in our county,
Oh,
those
yeah.
were your heroes. Those were the people
Yeah.
that you looked up to. And at that time, the 70s, like you, what were we seeing on TV, right? You're seeing
Right.
things like Dragnet and Adam 12 and those police shows. And then here are these real life heroes like that deputy you're talking about. And
Yeah.
you think, yeah, man, I want to be that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see that 6'4", 400-pound deputy step out of a car, it's like impressive, when you're a kid. And he was in shape. He was just a big man, and it would leaves an impression on you. And his uniform was sharp, he was just squared away, and it was really cool. I thought that guy's cool. I'd like to try to be like that.
Well,
So,
and you did, and you ended up going west and having an amazing career. What led you from the Midwest to the West?
oh, a lot of things. One was a winter in 77. It was so cold. And it was just one of those historic blizzards, extremely cold. And they told us back then it was going to be like that forever. And I remember I went one night to a traffic accident. A guy driving a snowplow was hit by a train, and the plow was driven like a mile down the tracks. And myself and a highway patrolman and some old auxiliaryman he had to go recover the person. Turned out to be a very close friend of mine, lifelong friend. I didn't know it till we got down there and found him. But walking along the tracks, chest deep in snow, and trying to carry that guy back. And then the old auxiliaryman had a heart attack on the way back and had to drag him out. There's no ambulances or anything back then. It was a local funeral home guy would come out. That was your emergency response back then. And I thought, maybe there's a better way where it's warmer, then I'm not going to have to deal with it. But I never was so cold in my life. And I don't know if it was in my head it was 75 below zero chill factor, but it was inspired me to go to warmer territory. And I thought, well, I got construction skills if I can't do anything else. So I know they're building like crazy in Arizona. I had a buddy that moved out here. So I came out and just started applying to all the police departments and finally got, a couple of calls, and it worked out that I landed at Mesa PD, and they generously gave me a job. So very grateful for that.
Well, in Mesa PD, Phoenix suburb you were there for the explosive
Yeah.
growth that Mesa has experienced. What was the population when you started?
I think we went from like 100,000 to 400,000, like that, or, a little below that. There was maybe 100 officers, and we wound up with like 900, and it was fast. Otherwise, I'd have never probably made lieutenant if they didn't hire hundreds of guys. At least that's what I tell people. It was amazing growth, and it was a shock to the system because, when I drive through it now after being gone for so many years, um, I still can't believe the expansion of the Metro Phoenix area. And I don't want to bore all your national audience with our local real estate stuff, but it's still
It's
growing.
extraordinary. It's
Yeah.
really, the growth is just explosive. And as when you're living that growth as a law enforcement officer, just constantly learning new streets and there's new people and
Yeah.
all of that, it's really extraordinary. And so, and you work your way up to lieutenant, you have a, I mean, and you did all the things, right? I mean, you did patrol, and you did intelligence, and you did, you end up running the police academy. It's a really, I've trained there many, many times. It's a beautiful academy.
So,
And you end up, touching young hearts and minds, as we say, right?
right. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I got it. A lot of my time was in special ops or covert ops stuff. And I had somehow fallen into that. I think I had such a baby face when I was younger. Back east, they sent me to some group and DEA basic training in Washington, D.C. and a bunch of other stuff. And I wound up and done undercover work uh, back there before I came out. And, that got picked up by the powers that be. And they said, oh, you kind of know about all this investigative stuff. So I wound up in that track and, did all the stuff. But the academy was the pinnacle. I was a training sergeant in the mid 80s and then was able to go back as a lieutenant. As a sergeant, I got to help design that facility. We were out there every day with, figuring out how it was going to look, imagining all the buildings and everything and the track. And it was, it's nice to see that it became something so important, and so many officers were able to go through there. But yeah, I love the academy and love being out there. It was so much fun.
So you kind of developed this talent, or you were probably born with it, I would guess. But for the written word. Now cops, especially cops when you and I came on in the late 70s, early 80s, we had to be good writers. You couldn't be a cop and be a lousy writer, because we didn't have the internet, and
Right.
we had to do everything by hand or on a typewriter. Google it, kids. And we had to tell a story. And I'll never forget that in my own police academy, having my report writing instructor say, you have to tell a story, and you have to tell it so that a judge 3 years from now reading a report is put right in that place where you are right now. And I thought, wow, that's a great way to put it. And you have a talent for that, and you took that talent as a police officer, and you've utilized it and continue to do so in a couple of different ways. One is academia, and training and information. The other is fiction. So let's talk first about the textbook side of things, and how you came into that.
Uh, I had been teaching at the community college as an adjunct. I did that for 13 years. And I guess let me back up and say I got into writing. Once I wrote a 300-page wiretap affidavit, I thought this is as big as a book. Maybe I could write a book. So I stuck in my head, and eventually I went that route. But I I got into the writing game, I guess, later on. I should probably get into that, and with the teaching, and I got involved in a lot of different things. Let me just say that in the private sector, in the public sector, in academic and training things, especially after 9/11, I got involved in a broader sense. I was very fortunate to be able to do some things and be part of that. And so there was a need for textbooks because there were no textbooks per se on Homeland Security because no one ever heard the word before. And so we started writing, and I was lucky enough to work for the three largest publishers in the world, and textbook publishers. And I got published in all three of them multiple times, and either writing, ghostwriting, or contributing to textbooks on a variety of topics. And I wound up being very involved in that. And then I started a company in California in which I had a variety of things. I designed lab kits, actual courtrooms, furniture, and everything to build an entire courtroom for colleges. And we sold a bunch of those, and We built lab kits, forensic kits for students, lab kits for teachers to teach forensics, and we sold books and we sold online. I got involved a lot in online. And anyhow, all this time, though, I had still been dabbling in telling stories. As you say, you tell a story. And in police work, you learn, start at the beginning, tell each piece the way it happened, and tell it in a way that assumes that your reader has no idea what you're talking about. They have no backstory. You're telling the entire thing. So I got to writing, and I wrote a number of books, and during my academic time, a lot of the fiction work I did, and I did probably 20 of them, I did under pseudonym. But I didn't use my own name. I Because probably action adventure stories, you don't want to hear the guy that wrote your, introduction to, whatever, also wrote, some action novel with some crazy title on it. So I
Is your
did,
pseudonym like a cool name?
yeah, the Bronco Hammer books. And that was one of them. I've done others too, but that was
I
the
want
Bronco
people
Hammer
to
book.
know that.
Yeah, they're pretty wild. They're pretty wild. And so now I'm back to writing, under my own name again. And I'll probably be converting some of the mystery series I wrote back into my own name and republishing and reselling those. But um, at one time, I started out writing a Western novel probably in the 90s, historical fiction about Cochise County in around 1910. And that was probably still my favorite book because I love Westerns and it was a Western story. And that one's still floating around out there for people who love Arizona and love Western lore and love the horses and the horse cavalry and the Arizona Rangers. It's all basically true stories fictionalized into one storyline. I wanted to memorialize some of those guys in a certain way, perhaps not like some of our academic colleagues do, but in a way maybe people would read and enjoy and want to learn the academic piece of it. But no, my first love those pulp novels, like Mike Hammer and the Mickey Spillane, and I love Raymond Chandler. He was a San Diego guy for many years, and his house was there. The famous mystery writers, and so I'm
And I have to say, as one of your readers, you are I don't even know how to explain it. You really tell a story. It's more than telling a story. You drag people into that story where I found myself, if I put one of your books down and I kind of look up, I'm surprised that I'm in 2025 and I'm here in Tucson, Arizona, and all that. I mean, that is the mark of an extremely talented fiction writer.
I appreciate your generous statement, Betsy. I am learning every day, and I try to be better at it every day. Um, it's it's a lot. I'll tell you a fun thing with the writing this morning. I was sitting in my garage. I get up about 4, and I'm sitting out there at 6 a.m. editing a police article for a guy who's going to be blogging some police articles, and he wanted an editor. So my fiction writing gets to drag me back into the real writing too. And I'm grateful that you think that they pull you in. That's the intent, to take people to a different time and a different place. And when I write a police story, I really hope that people understand what police work is and how the dark humor keeps everyone on track. If you don't laugh, you'll cry, kind of a thing. And
And let me
so
ask you about that, because cops of our generation, we really, gallows humor was how we got through, right? We
very
didn't
much.
have a lot of like peer support and counseling opportunities and things like that. Do you think we're kind of missing that in the new generation? Do you think, and again, I don't mean to be insensitive, but do you think a little more gallows humor, and maybe a more one or more choir practices might help the mental health of our young generation?
My academic side of this says yes, we need it because that's what diffuses the tension. Whether everybody had a horrible nickname that could not be used today in today's culture. Everybody had it, at least one terrible nickname that was, yeah, it was insulting, demeaning, and you embraced your nickname, and eventually you love your nickname. And, the name, just the way we talked to each other was awful, but we loved each other, out in the street, our patrol squads and our special ops groups and everybody else, there's people who would lay down their lives for each other. But you
Amen.
talk trash and it's terrible. But what it does is diffuses all that other static, the noise, the tension that can creep in on you because the world will bombard you with that relentlessly. And an officer who can't let it go, keep it in perspective, is going to be doomed to feeling the stress of it someday. And this is one of the tools, the gallows humor, the dark humor, the nicknames, the relaxed approach to social norms, I guess, or of polite society. That's one of the ways that we manage it. And the horrible things you see, the terrible things that you have to witness or clean up, it's all, if you don't take that approach to it, there is no safety valve in many cases. And, when there is no safety valve, when there is no release, and it's organizational wide, I strongly believe that the complaints go up for citizen interactions because the friction has no release. So you'll have your excessive force, you'll have your, citizen attitude complaints and those kind of things. I may be wrong. That's just an opinion, but I just think we've really buttoned ourselves up too tight.
Well,
And
yeah, it's an opinion steeped in knowledge and experience.
yeah, well,
A-
yeah.
And that's one of the thousand reasons that I wanted to have a conversation with you, because I mean, tell me what you are, kind of on that vein. Um, what do you see looking forward for our profession, 2025 and forward?
I am not no one can see the future. And I hate to predict the future. Uh, but we could be on the cusp of coming back, uh, where public opinion comes back. It's always been, everything is in waves that happens. And at one time, you can look at our media and entertainment industry to see that the vigilante cop, the lone wolf cop, of the 80s and the 90s, that's what people wanted. And they wanted justice. They wanted to see, the bad guys held accountable at any cost, but not any cost, but, they supported law enforcement. And then we went into the anti-law enforcement era around, I guess, 2010, it started. And I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, and I went and watched all the Occupy groups. And when they would demonstrate in San Diego, I'd go over there and I videotaped them. I got a ton of video of all these guys and studied them and what was going on. And I think they're going to lose. I think we'll make our comeback. If we could take Los Angeles and hold it and bring stability to Los Angeles and the public opinion, in spite of the waves of negative media that seem like automatically thrown up before anyone has any facts, I think maybe the tide will turn, because it's just not going to sell. And that's the bottom line. The public wants to see the good guys win.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And our polling tells us that,
Yeah.
most people appreciate their cops. Most people don't want their police department defunded. Most people care about our mental well-being and our physical uh, health. And I think now in mid 2025, when we're seeing the riots, somebody, well, we know who it is trying to start these riots and bring us back into 2020 or 2014 or even 1992. And it doesn't seem to be taken hold in the way that I think the subversives really thought it was. Part of that's due to, it's many reasons. First of all, I think people are sick of being, crime victims for the last 4 or 5 years. I also believe that with alternative media and social media, people get a better story, a bigger picture than they did when we just all had to watch 3 networks in the 90s, right? And a couple of cable news channels.
Yeah. Well, Betsy, if you're from the farm life, like I am, that we're rooted in skepticism. And skepticism is a trait that's lost on many nowadays, and we need skeptics out there to look at every piece of it. And that's one thing that's beautiful about law enforcement. It's there. They may claim there's cover-ups and stuff, and there may be the occasional rare anecdote, of things that are not proper. But for the most part, nothing is more transparent than your police department. And everything is out there. The officers are even wearing cameras, and people can see what they do, hear what they say, and they're starting to make their own decisions, I hope. That skepticism, if that comes back, and where they look at, if someone says, oh no, the cops are awful, they look how they tormented this individual, and then you go back and look and say, yeah, that guy was kind of giving him a rough time, giving the officer a rough time. Maybe he did need to get handcuffed and taken to jail. And I don't know. I just have that feeling that the tide is turning.
I hope you're right. I so hope you're right. I got to tell you, LT, I could just talk to you for hours. But let people know you've got some epic social media out there. Where can people find you, your social media, the books? Give us all of that.
If you get on danielbyram.com, you will see a link tree, it's called, and it has access to where all the books are. Can I show a book?
Yes, heck yes.
Yeah. I got, a couple. This is my latest mystery. I don't know if this will show up inverted or not, but a mystery. And this is a rehash of a 1990s police story that I'm working on a sequel to now.
Oh, excellent.
40 years after this book took place. And Cold Blue Darkness. But anyhow, these are a couple that are still under my name or released under my name. And my Border of Vengeance, my Western book that I'm very proud of. It's a good story. But if they can look that up, I'll be there. And, I try to interact with as many people on social media as I can, and talk to people and joke with people as much as possible, and try and have make new friends. And, I don't have readers. I have customers. I want to write stuff that they want to see and make them happy, give them a good adventure, a good, exciting story, maybe a little over the top sometimes. But
I tell you, I'm so grateful that you share your wisdom and your talent, and your humor and your opinions with the rest of us. You've just made such a contribution, not just to our profession, but on so many other levels. And I can't thank you enough. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.